Welcome to the Voices of Florida House District 14, Love Thy Neighborhood, the podcast where your story matters. I'm Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, a lifelong Jacksonville resident, educator, advocate, entrepreneur, and your 2026 candidate for Florida House District 14. This podcast is more than just conversations. It's a movement. From kitchen tables to corner stores, from neighborhood meetings to City Hall, and all the way to the Florida State Capitol. We're bringing together voices from every block, every precinct, every walk of life. From Sherwood Forest, Moncrief to Norwood and Brentwood, Lakewood Forest and Grand Park, Cedar Hills and Hyde Park, Arlington and Fort Caroline, Southside Estates, Ocean Way and Turtle Creek. Also, Oakleaf, Normandy, and Crystal Springs. Your stories lead the way. And of course, we shine light on our historic neighborhoods: Springfield, Eastside, Durkeeville, San Marco, downtown near the Jaguar Stadium, and Merle Avenue. Communities rich with culture, struggling, and legacy. Phillip W. Minor. Upon retirement in 2008, Phillip relocated to Jacksonville, Florida, where he has been actively engaged in volunteer work in the cultural arts, youth development, and education and elective office politics. Phillip was a volunteer docent at the Ritz Theater and Museum and coordinated an educational program with the Duval County Public Schools. He remains active with several Democratic Party organizations in Duval County. Phillip's political service includes Duval County Democratic Election Committee, where he serves as a precinct committee man and District 1 Deputy District Chair. He is a past chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, past member of the Communications Committee, and former blog master. He was elected as a State Committeeman to serve on the Florida Democratic Party Executive Committee in January 2025. Phillip is also a member of the Duval County Asian Pacific Black Hispanic Environmental and Senior Caucuses, and the Democratic Women's Information Network, DWIN. He serves as a media contact and chair of the Public Relations and Membership Committee, chair of the Campaign and Legislative Affairs Committee, second vice president for membership, and a member of the Ways and Means Committee of the Black Caucus. A member of DWIN since 2014, he serves on the executive team and is chair of chairs. He currently serves on 2 state committees and as a chair of Region 5 of the Democratic Women Club of Florida, DWCF. He is a seasoned poll watcher and has recruited and facilitated training for poll watchers. Phillip is past vice president of the Hispanic Caucus. Phillip has also provided countless hours of consultation on effective political engagement and campaign service to Democratic organizations in 3 states. He was a founding member of the Duval County Obama Family Network in 2008. Prior to retirement, Phillip served higher education and the community with distinction. His tireless commitment to help others to reach high and go far permeated his work for 3 institutions of higher learning: a corporate 100 company, and countless of nonprofits and community-based organizations across the United States. Phillip retired from the Minnesota Private College Council Fund and Research Foundation in 2008. In 2011, he was recruited out of the retirement to direct the Multicultural Center for Academic Excellence and the GLBTA Programs Office at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Phillip has received numerous of honors, awards, and recognition for his work and community service from a diverse slate of entities, among them Inroads of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota Multicultural Development Center, Greater St. Paul YMCA, National YMCA Black Achievers Program, International Leadership Institute of Minnesota, the Midwest and Minnesota Trio Association, and the National Multicultural Institute of Washington, D.C. Phillip is a native of California. He graduated from Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon, and currently serves on the Alumni Board of Representatives and is a founding member of the Black Alumni Club. He parlayed his speech and communications degree into a distinguished career in higher education, administration, and corporate human resources. Phillip is most proud that each position he intentionally managed his professional responsibilities and community service commitments to help increase opportunities for others to succeed, especially people from marginalized communities and most specifically people of color, both domestic and international. Chief among his service commitments are pre and post retirement was his 20 years of service to the YMCA in St. Paul, Minnesota, and on the National Advisory Committee for the Black Hispanic Achievers Program of the YMCA of the United States of America. He joined the National Committee in 1992 and served as chair from September of 1999 until spring of 2009. In his tenure, Phillip served 3 national program directors and 3 presidents of the YMCA of the United States of America. Widowed after 35 years with his life partner, they have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Welcome, Phillip Minor.
Welcome, everyone. This is your host, Teresa B. Wakefield Gamble of Voices of Florida House District 14, Love Thy Neighborhood podcast. And today I am super excited to interview our next Advocacy Legacy Series guest speaker, Mr. Phillip Minor, who is no stranger to the platform because he kicked it off for me back in 2019 during the pandemic when we were talking about redistricting. But this time we're going to talk about legacy in action, purposeful politics, and community power. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Phillip.
Teresa, it's my pleasure to be back with you on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about Mr. Phillip and all the work that he has done. So before we get into details, let's talk about your background. Who is Phillip Minor?
Wow. Well, I'm the third of 3 sons. My mother and father, Esther and Hubert Minor, both originate from the great state of Texas. And actually, my oldest brother was born in the same home that my mother was born in a little town in Cleburne, Texas, just about 50 miles south of Dallas-Fort Worth area. But they moved to California early in their marriage, and the second son, my brother James, now deceased, and I were born in California. So I'm a California boy in terms of birthright. Did high school there, went off to college in Oregon, and from there, after graduation, went to work for yet a different university in the state of Washington, and I was there for, 1972 until 1987. 1987. Yeah. So, but the Pacific Northwest was good to me and I loved it. But like so many folks, you meet an individual and in order to make the relationship work, moved to the state of Minnesota where I was for another 20 some years, actively engaged in, political goings on, but principally education. And then in 2008, we retired here to Jacksonville. So that's kind of the places I've lived over this time. But I've always just been a person who enjoyed trying to link individuals with opportunities. That's kind of my calling, if you will, to try and, where possible, match a person's interests and needs and goals with opportunities to help them fulfill that. And I've not strayed far from that at all over my near 75 years, because I'll be 75 in September.
Now, you telling something a lot of people wouldn't even know that you was 75 years young. And we appreciate so much everything that you have done thus far. For those of you that don't know, Mr. Phillip has been very instrumental in my political candidacy career launch because I kept wondering about, what it would take to run for office, even though I wanted to do it decades ago when a lot of the women in Jacksonville was running for city council. So, Mr. Phillip, I know you wear multiple hats, and we're going to get into those hats. But let's hop in and let's talk a little bit about candidates you've worked with over the years here in Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, have ran for office. What are some good things that you saw? What are some things that was not, could have been done better? And what things needs to be done now, because I know right now every seat is up for re-election coming in 2026 from the federal, state, local, and even our school board elections. So let's talk a little bit about your role of mentoring candidates and empowering them, because you were very instrumental for me and very helpful.
Well, I appreciate that, Teresa. I really look at myself more as a facilitator because I have intentionally worked on very few campaigns as a paid staff person. I didn't want to be paid because all of our candidates in our party, in my view, need assistance. And it is a little difficult to think of telling, a candidate who's paying you, well, look, I can't do that for you today because I got to run over here across town to help candidate X do X, Y, or Z. So I have intentionally tried to stay open so that I'd be in a position to work with as many candidates as possible. But the two candidacies that probably stick out the most for me over time have been with Alvin Brown, both when he ran successfully and then with the unsuccessful bid for re-election. I did volunteer hard and heavy with his campaigns. Well, Ingrid Montgomery, who's been on your podcast before, Ingrid was paid staff with Mayor Brown, and wherever Ingrid would go, I would go, because we were all involved in the same political organizations, and we believe that we have to work hard together collectively in order to have a better shot at our candidates winning. So wherever Ingrid was going to go, a number of us were committed to trying to be right there present with her to work. Long story short, they needed someone to cut turf in the Alvin Brown campaign in that first run. And I think it was the first one because I worked on both of them. But bottom line is they didn't have anyone. And Ingrid had shown me how to do it. And so I said, well, I can do that just to carry you over. There was a person who was supposedly going to come from the FDP to do that for the Brown campaign. She was taking a leave and it's going to work that campaign. Well, they told me, Phillip, you only have to do it for 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks came, I went, and that person wasn't there. And long story short, I said, look, if I'm going to keep doing this and it's expected of me as opposed to I'm a volunteer and I can leave when I want to, then yeah, you will give me a couple of nickels. And so I did get paid on that campaign, but that was it. I did not want to do it that way, but because they needed the consistency, and if they were expecting that, then I may as well be paid, because I love the fact that I didn't get paid because then I could leave when I wanted to, because I just control that. But I did that, and it was an eye-opener working that campaign, watching all of the challenges from even how he had to staff up, and then the volunteers and keeping them engaged, making sure they're trained and timely canvassing and completing the forms, and then getting the doggone data in. Oh, and in those days, you had to individually enter the results of your canvassing. They didn't have this stuff where you could scan stuff. Well, we did get that in the second campaign, but initially, no, it was a manual entry thing. But the long story short, again, Teresa, was that I worked that one, those two, and then the real great one was when Joyce Morgan ran successfully for City Council here in District 1, where I live. I was very happy to have worked alongside her campaign manager, Brenda Titus, and her field director, if you will, Darren Mason, who went on to become her first EA, actually, when Joyce was elected. But it was fun but necessary work. And we were successful, again, in the first bid with Mayor Brown, and then likewise with Joyce Morgan. And then Joyce ran successfully for re-election. And I was a little less active with that run, because at that point I had become connected more significantly with DWIN, Democratic Women's Information Network, and we had begun the Candidate Identification and Support Committee, where with my efforts and assistance, we would track Democratic candidates from the time they would file to run through the primary and then the general with the individuals who were successful in getting past that primary hurdle. And so my focus then shifted to really, again, information sharing for as many of the candidates as possible. Well, we wrote to all of them who had filed. We would keep them informed of the things that the committees were doing within the DEC, particularly the field and campaign committees. We tried to make sure they knew who the leadership was in the various clubs and caucuses in our county. We would link them with different resources for their consideration for endorsements and perhaps contributions. So the Democratic Women's Club of Florida had, and still does, have a PAC, and they have a political committee that individuals can receive endorsements from. Of course, Ruthless. We served as a resource to them. I have worked hard over time to keep that up, and we do it to this day. As individuals file as Democrats, we get to them to alert them that we're going to try to keep them as connected as possible, sharing the emails and websites of different caucuses, and certainly the DEC, encouraging them to get on the mobilize, to stay aware of all of the things we're doing, all of those kinds of things. And I will continue to do that as long as I have strength in my body, because information is critical. The last point I'll make is that I have always stayed close to the supervisor of election office, particularly the candidate services area, where I can't even remember the woman's name who was there when I first started, but her assistant was Lana Self, and then Lana got bumped up to lead that office, and Brenda Biles came in, and I'm still working with Brenda, because Brenda's still there, but there's a new Lana, and that's Sierra Frackler. And so bottom line, again, is we try to keep that information flowing to our candidates so they will be educated on the process, and hopefully that will increase their effectiveness and ultimately their success as candidates. I'll stop there. I was kind of a long-winded.
No. I wanted you to go into details because a lot of individuals, they don't understand who and what type of work goes into supporting candidates when they file to run. And I intentionally asked you that question because it's very critical, because there's a lot of rules involved on how much your local DECs can get involved and what they can do and how they can help. And it may not be public support. So
right, exactly. And again, and I'd like to say that in varying ways, the majority of our caucuses really do try to get involved and engage with our candidates within the rules. And I'm glad you suggested that. But another thing that we, the DWIN's Candidate ID Committee, would do is we would try to keep the individuals aware of the various things that the office, the SOE, the Supervisor of Elections Office, were offering. As you might know, they started doing a few years back a candidate university. And we, of course, got that information out to our people. I was a little disappointed that out of all of the individual Democrats who had filed at that point, again, these years are running together on me. I think it's been maybe 2 years ago. I know it's been since Sierra Frackler took over in that Office of Candidate Services, and I think she's been there 2 years now. But they did a candidate university where Jerry Holland himself was there to go over the copious number of rules and gave some wonderful tips and suggestions on how to really remain compliant, number one. But two, a lot of those resources would help them candidates put together stronger and more efficient infrastructures, campaign infrastructures, which bottom line, it will indeed increase the potential for success. So that those kinds of things are important. But then other things we've tried to do with DWIN and other groups is the candidate forums. I mean, I have been active over time with the Black Caucus, the Asian Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, now with the Environmental Caucus, thanks to your leadership and your outreach, really. I mean, sometimes, well, scripture is clear, you have not because you asked not. Well, you asked and I said yes. And so, but anyway, involved with a lot of various caucuses, and over time we have collectively and sometimes individually had candidate forums, and we always encourage our members to pick a candidate and get engaged with his or her campaign. We cannot force any individual, particularly a volunteer, to do anything, but we have worked hard as clubs and caucuses to encourage our members to ID a candidate, do your due diligence, commit to him or her, and then work. And that is something that even the DEC has done. And I think that the DEC in many ways gets an unfair rap that they don't do anything. I bristle when I hear candidates say that, because there are some limitations. Obviously, in the primaries, candidates would love to get endorsements and would love to get money. Well, we can't do that as a party when there's more than one Democrat in the hunt. And that's the way it is in many of the primaries here in Duval. So the very critical time that a candidate needs that endorsement and support, the party cannot give it. It isn't that it chooses not to. It cannot. That's just the way the rules are. And I'm saddened when that piece gets lost in the conversation. And so what's out there is that the DEC doesn't care, doesn't do anything to help our candidates. And I just take great issue with that. It may not be as efficiently run as some would like, but from my vantage point, since 2008, when I rolled into Dodge, it has improved tremendously. When you look at the thousands of doors knocked on, the thousands and thousands of text messages sent and emails that are sent. I mean, DWIN alone over the last three campaigns for at various levels, whether it's state, city council, et cetera, we have done more than 750,000 text messages ourselves. And that's probably 8 to 12 people. So it is not accurate to suggest that things aren't being done by the party. And DWIN has always seen itself as a partner, a full partner with the DEC. And we have encouraged the other caucuses to think and act similarly. And so it's important for people to know that those kinds of efforts and energy go on. Last point on collaborative help. Thanks to the efforts of DWIN, when Donna Deegan was running and Joyce Morgan had been turned out of city council and was running for property appraiser, through our efforts as a local chapter of the Democratic Women's Club of Florida, the largest of the clubs and caucuses of the FDP in the state of Florida, we were able to get our, as we call ourselves, persisters at our convention that year, when we should have been paying attention to what was being done in the plenary session, the opening plenary session that year. We collectively processed 5,250 postcards that were then to be mailed into Duval to help get out the vote for Donna and Joyce and other Democratic candidates on the ballot that election. That was this weekend before early vote started. And that was in the primary. We did that, but that was small potatoes, the 5,250 postcards. What we also did in the next 3.5 hours that morning was people in the room, as well as others in the back of our room who had come just so they could text in the same environment with the rest of us, and then plenty of persisters who had not come to the convention. They sent 122,888 text messages into Duval County to help turn out the vote. And I believe that in no small way, that effort on the part of Democratic women across the state at the behest of DWIN, but the collective commitment to help Democrats in Duval win, we think we provided the measure of difference to push Donna Deegan and Joyce Morgan over the finish line. That's the kind of work that's being done behind the scenes by folks. And I might add, and that work was being done when not as many of the Democratic candidates in our county even acknowledged the many messages that we were sending them on resources that they might consider, information about clubs and caucus meetings so they could do their meet and greets with it. Very few over the years have bothered to respond to any of the emails we've sent. The most I've gotten was one person wrote me to tell me that I had misspelled their name. Well, I text them back right away with a screenshot of the information they had sent to the SOE, because I picked up my information off the SOE. Now, if they sent it correctly to the SOE and the SOE didn't get it right, I would argue that the candidate should have seen that long before getting my emails. But that's okay. Complain about that all you want, but we continue to do the work on their behalf, and that's all we're going to continue to do because it fits with our mission, and that's what needs to happen. And that to me is what legacy is all about. I love your theme, if you will, that legacy of action. I flip those words. It's intentional action that creates the legacy.
That's
and the intentional action on the part of organizations like DWIN and the Black Caucus and the DEC and NOW and Moms Against Moms Demand Action. I'm getting these names mixed up because I'm a little animated now because I'm a little juiced up here. But Moms Demand Action, there we go. All of these groups, Beaches Democratic Club, Beaches Activist Movement, oh my God, the LGBT group here, Stone Spectrum, was Stonewall Alliance, all of them. We all work in our individual ways on the common goal to educate our voting public and encourage them to take part in this democratic exercise that is not simply a right, it's a responsibility.
That is great. That is good to know. I wanted you to get in detail because a lot of individuals need to understand, as a candidate, as a volunteer, as an ally, what can be done, how candidates need to position themselves. I love the idea about the candidate university. Unfortunately, I didn't hear anything about it last year.
Well, no, you weren't in the hunt when that first
right.
came on board, Teresa, and I don't know if they've continued to do it, SOE. So, but you weren't in the mix when they did that very first one. You were not.
Right. So, which is understandable, but I think it's a good concept that needs to be continued so that way candidates or potential candidates can get their questions answered on what it all takes holistically. Because a lot of times what we see from a distance may not be always the inner workings or behind the scenes that is involved. So,
Exactly.
first of all, I want to thank you for all the efforts that you're involved in and the amazing impact D-Win and the DWC Democratic Club, Women's Club of Florida did with the postcard and the text messaging. I think that is great. So now, I like when you said that you all encourage the members to pick a candidate to support. Now, my question is, along with candidate endorsements, how can individual members that's maybe listening and watching who are tied to associations that's supposed to be nonpartisan, what can they do individually to support candidates that they want to see change from long-standing name familiarity candidates that are not doing the job?
Well, so many different things. One, it really begins with attempting to continuously educate oneself on the different candidates, particularly those who represent you. And again, sometimes we get it a little mixed up here. We think, well, because we aren't particularly impressed with elected official X or candidate Y, we think, well, she ain't my person. Well, yes, she is. If she or he is the incumbent, yes, they are. And so, number one, we need to really educate ourselves on whether or not, from our perspective, they are delivering or they are not. Try to understand and learn their voting records, because there's a difference between what we think they're doing and what they are doing. And that data is available. So educating oneself is important. But I also believe that individuals, if you are linked to a various club or caucus, whether it's a Democratic one, whether it's a nonpartisan one, groups like Indivisible and March, they really are about action more than they are about specific party ideologies at all. And I think that there's room for all of us. But the point is, wherever you are engaged, then step that engagement up. Lead the effort of educating your committee or your club members on candidates. ID and marshal your monies in ways where you can partner perhaps with another club or caucus or organization to have community forums with the candidates and invite them in. You can do collective research on what are the community needs where you are, so that we are clear on our top 2 or 3. Again, my greatest issue has always been the judiciary. We really are so ignorant. If we think we don't know much about our candidates, we know even less about judges. And we, every 5 years with judges, they have the merit vote where we decide whether they merit going back to the bench. And if 60% of us as voters say, no, we don't think they should go back, they get to go home. But we know less about our sitting judges on the bench than we do about candidates that we invite to come into our homes or come to our meetings, and then we'll throw tomatoes at them or we'll throw flowers on their chest if they do a great job. But we let these judges skate. But just because that's the most important issue for me doesn't mean that I'm not going to get behind whatever the consensus is of what our top 2 or 3 issues are. But we must do that as a community of voters so that we can Let the issues drive our energy and our efforts, and then they can sign up. If you don't want to knock doors, and I don't, I have bad knees, pretty legs, but bad knees. Okay. So I don't canvas, but find what you can do. It might be that all an individual can do is slap labels on postcards.
Yeah.
Or slap stamps on them. How about this? Instead of struggling to find $25 in cash to donate to a candidate, why wouldn't you consider buying them a roll of stamps? Now, the first thing your viewers are going to say, well, a roll of stamps costs much more money than $25, and that's true. But most people buy rolls of stamps.
Yeah.
And I would encourage us, at a minimum, our contribution to candidates should be a roll of stamps, whether it's 100 postcard stamps or 100 forever stamps. I would certainly suggest the forever stamps if you're looking at first class, because they'll be good even when the rate goes up. But the point is, we can all look at how can we pool our precious dollars together in order to help candidates, as well as how do we pool our energies to make phone calls or to text or to decorate postcards, slapping labels, whatever. But we can do all those kinds of things. And if every organization, let's just use Democratic clubs and caucuses in Duval, if we all said we were going to simply divide up the pool of registered voters and take on who's going to contact whom, we can cover a lot of territory for all of our candidates. And maybe the deal is that we do that with the slate of everyone who's running, because then we're not saying support person X over person Y, but we're saying vote party. And so it might be that we can do those kinds of collective things. In one of the last cycles, the senior caucus had a GOTV committee, and we committed to writing to, ultimately we wrote to Democratic African-American women and African-American women NPAs. Why? Why did we pick a race and gender? Because we don't have a lot of money and we wanted our money to be leveraged to the max. The best voting group are women. Within that, African-American women. Why wouldn't we then target that group to try to increase the number of them who would turn out? But what we did was we took 66 and above when we did our first 1,500 postcard mailing. When we did the second wave, we did another 3,500, but we then broadened it. We went down to 56 and above and included, the first one was all folks, that 66 and above. The next one was only the African-American Democratic and NPA women, but they were registered voters who did not have a phone listed, nor did they have an email listed in their voter record. And why did we choose them? Because they can't get a phone call or a text, and they can't get an email because they didn't have an email or a phone number listed. So they were likely not going to get contacted unless they happened to be in the communities where volunteers were canvassing, right? So we chose to reach out to those folks who would most likely not be contacted. And why? So we could increase the possibility of turnout, because that's what wins elections, is turnout. So those kinds of things can happen. Any club or caucus or other organization can identify specific actions that their members can take, from IDing a candidate to work with specifically, or doing some general things to help all, whether again it's canvassing, phone banking, texting, and lastly, utilizing your own personal circles of influence. Many of us are online, whether it's just a family website, and we have a lot of, particularly in the African-American community, a lot of family reunion websites. Use those. My poor family, they know when it's an election year, presidential election year, because that's when I really step it up.
Right.
They know, look, and I used to make all these little verbal things at our various community events during our 4-day period. But the last presidential election, I guess just last year when we were in Charleston, South Carolina, they were a little surprised that I didn't lead with, all right, you know, it's a presidential election. But when they went into the hospitality room, when we opened the hospitality room, of course, all the Democratic literature was on the tables in there and the buttons and everything.
That's good.
We can do that. We can use our own personal social media platforms to really echo our messages, echo the encouragement to sign up for vote by mail, or remind them to check with their own local division of elections to see when early vote happens, and make sure they know where their voting polls are, all of that stuff. We can do that. I can touch somewhere between 16 and 20 plus thousand people in 5 minutes, given the access I have to various Facebook pages. And I can say, and not a bragging, I'm just thankful for this, the vast majority of sites that I try to partner with have been very good in reposting the things that I have sent to them. And I am forever and eternally appreciative of that. But it's if you build the right relationship with them and you're sending things that are pertinent and not caustic, if you will, although sometimes caustic works. but you can get your post reposted. But we can all do that. Last point on that. Any candidate who is unsuccessful in their primary bid, our recommendation every year from the DWIN Candidate Identification and Support Committee is don't close down your social media platforms just because you didn't get the nod for the nominee. Now is the time for all of those individuals who were not successful to become the cheerleading squad, the lead cheerleaders for the Democratic the Democratic nominee, in order to help him or her get over the hump. Your volunteers, encourage them to hang tough. Keep knocking on doors, keep sending texts. They'll just be sending texts and knocking on doors talking about the nominee as opposed to who the former candidate was. Those kinds of things we can do. And it's with that leveraged, collective, intentional, strategic work that we will be successful in 2027 in taking control of city council here in Duval County, city of Jacksonville. We can do that with the right collective commitments of all of us as voting volunteer workers and candidates and former candidates working collaboratively. We can take control of our city council in 2027. And Teresa, if we don't, then come 2031, when redistricting will be done again, we will get a repeat of what happened this last time, and that will be a Republican-dominated and, in some instances, Democratic-supported set of decisions that did not work well, in my view, as well as it should have for Democrats. I'm done on that.
Exactly. No. It's a segue. You mentioned GOTV and redistricting. I want you to, because some individuals are not familiar with the acronyms, so I like to educate so people, when they hear the acronyms and the terms, they know what they mean. So briefly explain what GOTV is, and also let's talk about the redistricting a little bit so people can understand how we got to this place now. And then we're going to segue into the turnout from the No Kings protest on this past weekend as well, on what we need to do to galvanize and keep that energy of almost 5 million people showed up to protest. They say that's the world's largest protest in the United States history. So what is GOTV?
The acronym is Get Out the Vote. G, get, O, out, T, the vote. Get out the vote. And it really is just the shorthand language for the energy and efforts that are absolutely necessary for us to win elections, because elections really are win or loss based on how effective any given party is, or any candidate campaign is, in turning out the vote. That's what that is. And so when people hear that term, that's what we're talking about, is get out the vote. And I would hope that anyone who will view the podcast will commit themselves to working on or with the GOTV or campaign or field committee of whatever organizations they are part of, even if they are nonpartisan. Look at our fraternities and sororities. They must be nonpartisan, but there's nothing partisan about encouraging people to get out and vote. That is civic responsibility and duty. And so particularly for the not-for-profits, for the nonpartisan organizations, encouraging people to even register to vote, to sign up for vote by mail, which can be an effective backup for voting, encouraging people to go to the polls and vote, encouraging people to educate themselves on the pluses and minuses of the candidates that are out there running certainly educate themselves on the issues. All of that advocacy is allowable. And many nonpartisan organizations, and again, I just want to use the fraternities and sororities because they are such a huge block in the African American community and growing in other communities of color, and certainly they are huge with our Caucasian brothers and sisters. But those organizations can be extremely instrumental in GOTV efforts because GOTV is, in my view, synonymous with civic education and civic engagement. And many of our sororities and fraternities use that, or social action. But GOTV, get out the vote. And I hope all of our viewers will commit themselves to doing that in all the ways they can. And it might be they're only going to do it in their immediate neighborhood. They might only commit to doing it with their expanded family. They might only commit to do it at their house of worship. And my response to that is thank you. Thank you. Because inch by inch, anything's a cinch, you know. So a few people doing a lot, you get a movement. Because what is a movement other than just a collection of individuals acting similarly and simultaneously toward a common end? That's all it is. But it's a collection of individuals. So each of us as individuals have a role to play. And I dare say, just decide how much. And if you say, I'm only going to talk to the 150 people in my housing division, guess what? Fine. I'm not trying to say, well, can't you make it 200? I don't understand why you can't. No, I'm not going to struggle with you. I'm going to say thank you for committing to talk to the 150. You need some help? I got a couple of minutes, next week on Thursday. I'll walk with you. Take people where they are, because that 150 might make the difference.
That's true.
My understanding is that John F. Kennedy won by, on average, 1 vote per voting precinct in the country when he ran successfully in 1960.
Wow.
That's how important the vote is. People don't understand that. Or if we look at another race, L.J. Holloway, when she ran just 2 times ago, she loses by 34,000 votes, something like that. But 75,000 registered Democrats in Duval County section alone did not vote.
Yep.
And then we're screaming and yelling about those boundaries being impossible for us to win. I think in general, that may be true when you look at total numbers, but the fact of the matter, it's all about turnout, as I said earlier. And that particular year had more Democrats just in Duval County, and only about half our county is in Congressional District 4. But if more of those 75,000 who stayed at home would have gone out, she would have won.
Right.
So yes, votes matter, but they cannot make a difference if they don't get cast. And so that's the trick, But you said, talk a little bit about the redistricting. That is such a critical process, because that's where the party in control at the time that the redistricting happens, that's the time when they are in a position to draw boundaries in such a way that it can effectively guarantee their control long term in terms of winning races.
So with redistricting, that's based on what we do on the census surveys that we have to complete.
Right. Every 10 years the census is done, and then the year following the census is when we redraw our districts, because people may have shifted in terms of where the population is and all of that kind of a thing. And so always the year following the census is when the redrawing of the lines happen. And I can tell you, the Republicans have been very intentional over the previous 50 years to intentionally gain their control and foothold across our country, to the point where the majority of our state houses and governorships are in their hands and have been, and they have systematically been able to control that redistricting process. I understand that I think it was Obama's first midterm, or was it his second? I can't even remember now which one of his terms, after the first 2 years of it. I think it was his very first one. It may have happened in both, but bottom line is that particular year, Teresa, 1 million more votes were cast for Democratic incumbents in the U.S. House of Representatives than were received for Republicans, and they still polished our clock in terms of their gains in the U.S. House. Why? Because of the redistricting that was done in the respective states of the United States. That's how important it is for us to vote and vote party so that we will have, where possible, control of our various municipalities, whether it's city council, state legislatures, because state legislatures are the ones that draw the maps during redistricting, you see. And it's city councils that do it at the city and county level. It's important. But again, imagine 1 million more votes to Democratic incumbents that particular year, and Republicans still polished our clock. That's power and control. But that's the difference between what, in my view, Republicans do. They plan for the long haul. As I understand it, the Republican Party didn't even have anti-abortion language in their platform before Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
But Ronald Reagan convinced the women in the Republican Party, we're going to put it in, but I don't need you to beat us up on it because the timing ain't right in the country for it to pass. And they laid low all of these years between Ronald Reagan and then just, what was it, a handful of years ago when Roe v. Wade fell. But Republicans planned for the long haul. They had the people in place in the city council offices or chambers, in the state legislatures, to redraw those lines that make it very hard for Democrats to win control. The best we can hope for is that there will be enough disaffected Republicans and irate independents, or as we refer to them in Florida, non-politically aligned individuals, to vote with Democrats next year so we can regain the House.
Right.
So we can regain the House. But if you look at our own state legislature, it will be a minute before Democrats really have the kind of control, if ever, in our state House. I think the best we can plan for is to keep eroding that supermajority.
Right.
But if you just look at one thing, look at the threshold needed to pass revenue enhancing bills or tax bills. Right now, that threshold is so high that even if, or maybe I'll say when, let's keep it positive, when Democrats regain control of the state legislature, it will probably not be numerically possible for Democrats to always get the maximum needed to pass a revenue bill. There will probably always be enough Republicans to block a tax increase. That's power, but they plan for it. They know that they can't stay in control forever. They don't need to have control. They just need to have enough votes to block the other party. But that's the difference between playing checkers. That's a jump at a time, and playing chess, which is 5 or 6 moves down the board. The great ice skater, I can never get his last name pronounced correctly, but Wayne Gretzky or something like that. He was such a great ice hockey player. He was asked, what is your success due to? You know what he said? I don't skate to where the puck is. I skate to where the puck will be. He anticipates where that puck's going to be, and that's where he goes. That's what Republicans have done. They have anticipated where they want the country to go, and they understood that we can't control the process if we don't win elections and win enough for control. Democrats want to defend democracy. Republicans want to define it. And they only get to define it if they have a controlling percent in each of the chambers. And they have done superlatively in doing that. But I'm of great hope. We are a party of bright people. We don't always follow the right path necessarily, but it's not that we don't have the capacity to. And I think we do learn slower than I'd like, but we are going to come back indeed. And not just because we're the Democratic Party, but because we're on the correct side of issues, whether it's appropriate taxing, whether it's helping those who legitimately need it. We're not in favor of people getting help that don't need it. That's never been the Democratic, position. It's always those that do. Lincoln would say it too, not a penny more than is needed, but not a penny less than is needed, So, and Democrats have really been there, but we somehow don't articulate it as well now as we may have done in the past. But we've always been on the correct side of issues, most often. I mean, we were too silent on a lot of segregation things in our early history, for sure, and Republicans led that fight. But that certainly isn't where they are today. But I dare say that, in my view, my humble opinion, is that Democrats are more right than wrong on issues today. And we really are going to benefit our country and I think our world if we can regain a stronger representation in the various political chambers of power.
That's good. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, I know I had Mr. Phillip to go deep in GOTV, get out the vote, the candidate support, where we should be, redistricting, because all these components is part of our civic engagement process. And I wanted him to explain it because it helps you to understand why he was elected state committeeman to serve on the Florida Democratic Party Executive Committee this year, and why he serves on two state committees as the chair of Region 5 of the Democratic Women Club of Florida. And he is actively involved with DWIN, the Democratic Information Women's Network. And also he does training with poll workers, and he's been the past vice president of the Hispanic Caucus. And he does consultation on political engagement, campaign services, Democratic organizations in 3 states, how he has became the founding member of the Duval County Obama Family Network, along with Miss Ingrid Montgomery, who I interviewed early on. And I wanted him to share the insights because a lot of times we as individuals, we rely on hearsay information and not taking the time to get the actual factual information. So with all that you have said and shared, I'm grateful for it. And your backgrounds most totally support your advocacy, especially in education and higher ed and in corporate America. We just had the No Kings protest march on June 14th across our country. And a lot of folks, even in Jacksonville, Florida, Duval County, they participated. And just watching the crowds and the droves. And when they finally came out with the final numbers, they said 5 million people came out to protest. What was I saw your Facebook post where you put all the different pictures of the different cities who turned out. And I love your quote that you said that we hope we get this type of level of support come this upcoming election time. So what do we need to do next? Now this has happened. How do we keep all these folks engaged and how we fuel that energy, that frustration against the current sitting president administration to make sure they pivot their support to candidates to get rid of the supermajority at the federal, state, local, school board, judges, all these different people, like you say, have been planning over the long haul to take control. What do we need to be doing now? Because I've heard conversations. Does the Democratic Party have a plan? What they're gonna do to either dismantle what has happened and to either rebuild and restore that what has been destroyed.
The right question for sure. Let me react to the No Kings Day. I was absolutely thrilled with what I saw, and I'm not much for a news person. I really shut down my my news consumption, my intentional news consumption during Donald Trump's first run, because I was tired of, I never did watch Fox, but I was tired of the so-called liberal left media. In my view, they articulated more of what Trump was doing than Fox did. I mean, I was just bothered by that, and I didn't like listening to him. I dare say a 6th grader could detect the absence of truth in much of what he was sharing or spewing. And so, but I did want to see what was going on across the nation, and I was and I am excited about the action and the energy, and I do hope that it will continue. And I was particularly pleased with our state, with Florida, and most specifically right here in Duval. Unfortunately, I was not able to take part in any of our rallies here because I had already been committed to be a keynote speaker and then be a table host at an event down in one of the 5 counties that I'm responsible for with the Democratic Women's Club of Florida. There are 5 counties in my region, Region 5, and I was down in, well, I'm not quite sure which county Melrose is in. I think it's technically in Clay, I think, but on the south end. But anyway, the Democratic Women's Club of the Lakes area, which actually has members from 4 counties, Bradford, Alachua, Clay, and Putnam, they sponsored their first annual Equality for All event. And their leadership asked me to keynote and then serve as a table host at a table that was focused on persons of color. It was share your stories about these 5 or 6 different areas: lesbian, same-sex marriage, healthcare issues, elder issues, and then persons of color. And so I was glad to accept that invitation. And so I was not here. I was not available to participate in our actions here. But I did look broadly, and I'm excited, Teresa, about the kinds of things that went on. Again, I lived in Minnesota before moving here, and so I'm still kind of linked with a lot of stuff there. And right next door to Minnesota is Wisconsin. And the last place that my spouse and I lived, we were only a handful of miles from the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. And Hayward, Wisconsin was near. And one of the most exciting Facebook pages I saw was that 100+ people had turned out. What was it? 500 in Hayward. They're only a town of 2,000. So, I mean, it was 25% of the population, whatever it was. It was exciting to see that because they were excited. And it was Republicans, Democrats, Independents, the whole bunch. So, but to the point of what might we do to keep this momentum going? I hope the various organizers, but more importantly, the individuals who took part, seek out the established organizations in your area and commit to working with them. Because there's probably not a single one of the communities that had a turnout on the No King's Day that does not have some kind of a civic engagement organization in town that's trying to keep people excited about voting and educating yourself on issues. ID that or those organizations and link with it and do the work, because they'll have plenty of things for you to consider doing. But what I would like for all of us to do nationwide is to give intentional consideration to this one resource, the Digital Democracy Project. And I hope your viewers will simply Google that, Digital Democracy Project, because it is an opportunity for individual registered voters to install a specific app on one's phone, and it will allow you, the individual voter, to vote on the various bills that our U.S. Congress are deliberating over. And in some states, fortunately, Florida is one of them, you can also follow and vote on the various bills that our state legislature are considering. Why do that? Because the collective outcome of those votes, the elected officials will be scored against or will be measured against. So one example, if one of the many bills that was trying to suppress our access to voting or the amendment process here in our state of Florida, you can vote on that. And generally, many of us were in favor of that amendment passing. Well, if you go on to the voting platform via the Digital Democracy Project, their Votes, VOATZ app, you'd be able to register your vote in favor of or against the bill that was going to suppress it. And then the majority of the voters would say, we don't want this bill to pass. And then you see, because the app shows you how the elected officials voted. And so if 90% of the folks who vote say we don't want that bill, but the elected official does, then he or she's going to have a low score on issues that the public viewed as critical or important. So it is critical for Democrats, disaffected Republicans, and unhappy NPAs or independents to use this tool so that our voice via our vote on the app will be registered, and we will measure these elected officials against that. So we will be able to show them you have voted poorly when it comes to the issues of the people.
Right.
We must do that. So I would ask all 5 million of my fellow countrymen and women to Google Digital Democracy Project, follow their instructions for getting the Votes VOATZ app on your phone, and then regularly identify time weekly. Maybe it's only Tuesday and Thursday between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. How about that? But commit yourself to specific time weekly to go on and vote on the various issues. There are some polls that can be taken, but it's a tremendous educational tool because it pulls the language of the bills. It even gives pros and cons of the bills to really help you decide where you are on the issue. Because we're not begging the question of vote the way we want Democrats to vote. We want you to be educated on the issues. And it's your choice whether you support, oppose, or whether you abstain from any given bill that is in the hopper at any given time. But it will be a tremendous tool for us to be able to use and show our elected officials, oh no, you get an F when it comes to healthcare issues, or a woman's right to choose, or book banning, or gun safety, whatever your pressure point is, you see. So that Digital Democracy Project is an action that can become a legacy action that I would encourage people to do. It will be very, very telling when folks can show their elected official where they have fallen down and ask them to explain why, if 90% of us say that we don't want guns in schools, did you vote for guns in schools?
Exactly. That is perfect. Yes, I love it. I'm glad you brought up Digital Democracy Project because I did interview Sadie, who's the Florida chapter director, and she went into detail of how the project works, and also yourself and Jessica and Dee Wynn brought her to Jacksonville to do a training on it. So I agree. That is a digital tool to help us vote smarter.
Right. But the other piece really is individually, we really have to commit ourselves to doing two things. Well, it's one thing, multiple points. We must give of ourselves. We must give our time to support, whether it's a slate of candidates at the primary where you're wanting people to educate themselves on all of them, but still encourage individuals. We must ID who we support individually, because that's who I hope more of us will give our time to help that candidate get his or her message out. And then we must give more of our treasure. I'm not asking anybody to have your kids or grandkids go hungry in order for a candidate to be elected. But I am asking everyone to look at your discretionary spending. And if there's that little weekly delight that you do, or maybe it's a daily thing, will you consider cutting back on that a little bit every week so that that economic savings can then go toward helping a candidate? And it might be just to buy 100 postcard stamps for him or her, or 100 forever stamps. Or it might be that money, that equivalent cost of 100 forever stamps, you might give to the candidate so that he or she would be able to buy enough ability to text hundreds of people, because texting is about 2.5, 3.5 cents, a hit. Well, $100 will go a long way in terms of texting.
Right.
It will go a long way. So it's the individual giving of his or her time, their talent, and their treasure to the candidate or candidates of their choosing. Or you might choose to give to your favorite PAC that helps individuals in certain sectors of the political scheme. You may only want to give to a Ruth list because they help women win. Fine. Mm-hmm. Do that. Right. Do that. You don't have to do what Phillip W does. Do you? Do you, boo? Do you, boo? But that's what we need to do. Because let's look at it this way. 248 200,000, somewhere between 245, 250,000 registered Democrats in Duval County.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen, Teresa, if each of our 250,000 Democrats said, I'm going to give the Duval County Democratic Executive Committee, whether I like the chairperson or not, I'm going to give that organization $1 a month.
Exactly.
$1 a month. You can't get a cup of coffee for $1. You can't get a burger at Burger King for $1, not even McDonald's, and they are always running some kind of special. But you put $1 on the counter, they're going to look at you like you got to come with some more money, okay? But if we gave $1 a month, can you imagine what we as a party in Duval would be able to do with $250,000 a month?
That would be amazing.
We would be able to buy airtime for every candidate in the primary.
Yes.
You know, one might argue with that kind of money, we wouldn't have to try and pick and choose, and we're not supposed to anyway. But with that kind of money, we can do a full page ad. Watch this, Teresa. We can do a full page ad in at least the various minority and or female oriented press vehicles in our community. I'm not speaking against the Times Union. We can put some money there too, but we might want to just look at, you know, some of the papers in the Hispanic Latino community, the Asian, the African American community, whether it's the Jacksonville Free Press or the Florida Star. I mean, you know, we can do that. We can do that.
Amazing. Yes,
so give of ourselves. And I'm not asking anybody to try to get 10 other people to do what you do. That would be nice, but that's not my ask. My ask is for each of us as individuals to do something with our time, with our talent, with our treasure for our party candidates. That's what I'm asking, because that's what it will take for us to keep this momentum going. Even if we just simply refocus our postings on our various social medias to try and make sure that when we know someone's running, even if they just do a shout out, hey, Teresa, glad that you filed again and you're running. Sister, I'm with you. However you spell WID, W-I-D. Okay, I'm with you. Yeah. But if we just do that, or, I mean, you push out a lot of things. If we just repost things that you and other candidates do so that we broaden the pool of registered voters who will then know you, know your position or any other candidate, so that we have an educated electorate, so that when it's time to vote, we will have fewer people scratching their head wondering, who is that? You know, who am I? You know, that kind of thing. Come on. Yeah. So that's what I think we can do that. But the other piece is never forget that you're not alone. 5 million people that we are aware of. And of course, if it was 5 million they were counting, you know it was more, okay? Right. That's a whole lot of people who are unanimous in not wanting there to be a king. Now, what does that translate to in terms of policies? There's a whole lot of things that it means. We're not excited about tax cuts for individuals who are uber rich. And the uber rich aren't even asking for it. They'll take it if given, but they're not even asking for it, but they're not going to pass on it. But they're not getting ready to move out of the country if the tax circumstance doesn't shift. They never make an investment unless they've already considered the tax consequence. So, I mean, it's silly for Republicans to be running around here with that stuff, but that's another issue. But all of the different issues that a king would want to put in place, we are against. Let's translate those so that when we are talking to our neighbors, we're knocking on doors, we're texting or whatever, we're talking about the issues that matter. Property insurance needs to go down. Insurance costs for property needs to be regulated better here in the state of Florida. We still have a problem in Duval with septic versus sewer. I mean, come on. There are a number of things. And if you have a king picking and choosing, and if he or she picks and chooses the wrong things, you'll never get progress. And let me say this to that point. Republicans have had effective control of Duval County for 5 doggone decades, if not longer. How is it that since consolidation, we're still suffering with a septic to sewer challenge? That's what happens when you have that kind of control. They have the ability to make that change, and they have consciously chosen not to do it. Yeah. That alone tells me they need to go.
Exactly. I totally agree. That is great, Mr. Phillip. Last but not least, this podcast is for Florida House District 14 residents and voters. And for those that don't know, Mr. Phillip does live in Florida House District 14. And before
Yes.
we sign off, what do you envision your state district to be? I know you live in City Council District 1, but City Council District 1 is within the state Florida House 14 district.
Yes.
So, what have been your experience with the current incumbent? What has been done? What needs to be done? And what changes you would like to see?
Well, first and foremost, I would really like for the history of my representative not being available when different ones of us have gone to the Capitol, simply wanting to interface with our representative. I would like for that to change, because if you will not avail yourself to your constituents, this voter has a problem with that. And so just the availing yourself to your constituents is important. And I can tell you, every time I've gone to Tallahassee, when that my current incumbent has been in office, even when the district structure was that I was not even in her area, but we wanted to visit with each of our elected officials from Duval. Every time I've gone, and I can't remember how far back this is now, Teresa, but gosh, Hazel Gillis was the president of the Duval County Democratic Black Caucus, and my God, she hasn't been president in many, many, many years. But that was my first trip, day on the Hill with the statewide Black Caucus. I was excited as all get out. I was going to meet, my representatives and stuff. I was just excited. Well, anyway, unfortunately, she was not present, and every time since then, she's not been present. When I've gone, and I've gone with the Black Caucus, I've gone with ASME, I've gone with DWIN. There's another group that I've gone, I can't even remember. But every year, the Democratic Women's Club, we have what we call tally days. And in the last 3 years, I think it's been now, maybe more, we have had a delegation of Democratic women members in Tallahassee every week of session. So I think it's been at least 3 years, but it might be 4, Teresa. Again, these things are running together on me. And every time, I've gone every time with DWIN, never has my incumbent been available. That's not good. Now, the easy way to say it is this. If you aren't availing yourself to your constituents, and I dare say I think it's by design as opposed to happenstance, then how is it that you can be representing our needs? Exactly. I just don't see those things going together. If you aren't availing yourself to your constituents, you then probably aren't giving attention to your constituent needs. And if you look at the kinds of things that get voted on where there's been a vote, there certainly has been a lot of activity in supporting things that are going on in other parts of our state, but not as much with regard to State House 14, in my view. And again, now I believe people have a right to have a position on an issue that's their own. I don't always line up with my representative on some things. So, and again, that's okay. But I am challenged when I can't get FaceTime, or any of us, can. And now, again, full disclosure, it could very well be that every single time I was there with the group, there was a legitimate explanation for the absence. It could have been personal, family. I don't know, but I find it curious that she's batting 1,000, or whatever the highest batting is.
Wow.
I'm not very good with sports analogies, but nonetheless, she is there, and I will do all that I can to educate people on the issues and encourage them to do their own due diligence to see whether or not any given candidate, and in this instance an incumbent, is meeting a reasonable standard with regard to representation. And if the answer to that is no, then I dare say that we need a change.
I appreciate the candidness and the straightness. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have just had an amazing conversation with Mr. Phillip Minor. He is an extraordinary individual. As you can see, his action creates his legacy. He is purposeful in politics and how he drives that community power, which is supernaturally contagious. So, Mr. Phillip, as we get ready to depart, let everyone know how they can connect with you or any upcoming announcements and events you want to share with the different groups you work with in our last few minutes before we sign off.
Well, sure, and I thank you very much for the invitation to be on your podcast again. But I am Phillip Minor, and individuals can reach me. I'm on Facebook, Phillip W. Minor. You can touch me there. But another easy way is by extension. You can reach me if you play ball with our local Democratic Party, the Duval Dems, www.duvaldems.org. You can't link to me from that site, but if you commit yourself to working with my party, you are going to get me because I'm constantly watching that. Or through the specific caucus that I work the most with. That's not that I don't work with others, but the most is with the Democratic Women's Information Network here in Duval. And that website is www.duvaldwin, DUVALDWIN.org, and I am the chair of chairs. And so, but don't send me an email through my website email address because full disclosure, I still don't know how to access that thing, and I've been the chair of chairs since 2014. So it's better if you leave a general message because then the other folks will say, Phillip, you got to contact so and so and so and so. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to those kinds of things. But hit me on my on the Facebook page because I do try to be active there, and I have the ability to post across a number of platforms on that particular social media option. But Phillip Minor, and I'm also just available. You can Google me or you can ask for information, and they'll give you my phone number. That'll work.
Yeah, you're right. They sure can Google you. Well, right. Thank you so much, Mr. Phillip, for this opportunity. And always supporting me, always keeping me engaged and keeping me informed where I need to be as a candidate, where I need to be in this political space. And I encourage each of you, if you are still unsure on what you want to do or like to do, or even consider running for office, the first thing I suggest you to do is to come volunteer with the duvaldems.org. That's the best way that you can determine and learn more about the political landscape locally, statewide, federally, even including our school board elections, and like Mr. Phillip said earlier, about our judges. So this is not the last episode that we will hear from Mr. Phillip, but I wanted to bring him back because he has the years of experience that we need to capture and learn, and also to encourage our young people, most definitely. Absolutely. To get involved and engage and come volunteer. You don't have a summer internship this summer or you lost one, get involved with your local Democratic Election Committee. Thank you so much, Mr. Phillip.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me again and enjoy the balance of this day.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Florida House District 14. Love thy neighborhood. If you felt seen, heard, or inspired, share this episode, subscribe to our podcast, and spread the word across our district and beyond. From Durkeeville to Dunn Avenue, from East Side to Edgewood, from Springfield to San Marco, and across every street near the stadium downtown. We are building power, one voice at a time. Don't forget to sign the petition to get me on the 2026 ballot and donate $26 today to keep this campaign for the people, powered by the people. Schedule your story session, stay connected on social media, and join our volunteer team, digitally or in person, because change starts with us, right here, right now, right on your block. Until next time, love your neighbor, lift your voice, and let's fight for the future we all deserve. Paid for by Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, Democrat for Florida House State District 14. Produced by CRPC Now Media. Powered by Concierge Resource Professional Consultants, LLC.